Hi everyone, sorry about this. There's a bit of mess. You can see it a little bit, but it's fine. Just moved house. And that's why there haven't been any videos over the last few days, which was perfect timing because Matt Hancock resigned. And there was a whole thing about him, as I'm sure you've all heard a million times, cheating on his wife, having an affair with his aide. And that was during a period where I literally couldn't use the internet. There's no service where I live, and there was also no Wi-Fi at the time, but we've got Wi-Fi now, so here we are. And Keir Starmer has not been very happy with the way Boris Johnson handled this whole situation, and a lot of people, I think, a big criticism people have had of Keir Starmer is that he's been far too lenient on the government. He's been kind of often saying, oh, I agree with the government, and very often when corruption scandals have occurred, or at the very least cronyism or sleaze, which is basically just the term that people use when they don't really have the backbone to say full-on corruption, he hasn't called for people to resign. Now though, he's been he's being a bit more vocal, right? He's being a bit more vocal. And of course, Boris Johnson didn't sack Matt Hancock, he resigned, because he was breaking lockdown rules to kiss a woman other than his wife. So, what that says about his character is enough anyway, but as we know, the government cares not for those kind of things. Boris Johnson is a serial adulterer, and he can't tell people how many kids he has because he himself is not sure. So, that's no news to us. And one rule for them, one rule for the rest of us, that's no news to us either. But Keir Starmer really did have a go at Boris Johnson in Prime Minister's questions today. And it was actually pretty substantial. Give it a watch.
Why didn't the Prime Minister sack the former Health Secretary on Friday morning?
Mr. Speaker, I read the story in common with you and everybody else on Friday, and we had a new health secretary in place by Saturday, Mr. Speaker, which I think, given that we have a pandemic, I think to move from one health secretary to the next with that speed was fast, Mr. Speaker, but it wasn't as fast as the vaccine rollout.
The Prime Minister must have been the only person in the country who looked at that photo on Friday morning and thought that the Health Secretary shouldn't be sacked immediately. It's no questions asked by the Prime Minister on Friday and no questions answered today. There's a pattern here. When Dominic Cummings broke the rules by driving to Barnard Castle, the Prime Minister backed him. When the Housing Secretary unlawfully approved a £1 billion property deal for a Tory donor, the Prime Minister backed him. When the Home Secretary broke the ministerial code, the Prime Minister backed her. And when the Health Secretary broke COVID rules, the Prime Minister tried and wanted to back him too. Every time it's the same old story. Isn't it the case, Mr. Speaker, that while the British people are doing everything asked of them, it's one rule for them and another rule for everybody else?
Mr. Speaker, there was a new health secretary the following day.
That was actually pretty effective. I thought, Starmer seemed robust, he seemed strong, he seemed, focused, and prime ministerial, whatever that really means. But it's I think, a very effective way of showing people just how awful the political establishment of the United Kingdom is, just how awful the Conservative Party are, is by just quickly listing off corruption and incompetence related scandals that have occurred in the past 6 months. And you'll usually have, at least 5 or 6 huge ones and then lots of little ones, like I'm talking, dozens and dozens and dozens of little ones. So, him mentioning Priti Patel, him mentioning Matt Hancock, him mentioning the was it the Housing Development Secretary? I can't remember. But mentioning these different ministers and these different scandals. Now Boris Johnson every single time has backed them, either when they've eventually resigned themselves, or there've literally been no repercussions whatsoever. So I was happy to see Keir Starmer attacking Boris Johnson in that manner, pointing out the corruption, pointing out the sleaze and the cronyism, and also, I think, to an extent, the incompetence. But it's not going to be effective unless he actually does it on a platform and in a situation where the British people are going to be likely to watch that. Most people don't watch Prime Minister's Questions. Most people don't even see the highlights on the news, right? Most people just don't care. And I understand that, because it's pretty boring. The only interesting part is when the Leader of the Opposition and the Prime Minister start, jabbing at each other. And even then, still a little bit dull at times, especially, when you've got someone who doesn't really have a lot of charisma, like Keir Starmer, going up against someone who refuses to answer any questions that don't have answers that reflect him in a positive light, like Boris Johnson. So I can understand why people don't watch it, but Keir Starmer and his team need to realise that you can't rely on a good performance at PMQs. You really can't, because people just don't hear about that. They just don't pick up on the things that are pointed out there, because most people don't watch it. So he needs to be going all over the media and shouting down the Tories about this, because this is obvious. It's obviously, a situation where the sort of political elites, if you like, can essentially get away with whatever they like, right? Matt Hancock didn't even get sacked. He didn't even lose his job as health secretary, breaking health laws, breaking coronavirus lockdown restrictions. He couldn't even bring himself to not do that as health secretary, one of the architects of those laws, one of the people who's supposed to be looking after the health of the nation. And then he doesn't even lose his job, other than of his own accord. Now, I'm sure, the pressure was mounting on him. He wouldn't have resigned if there wasn't. But the fact that he didn't get sacked is absolutely abysmal. And I do think, that's the difference between Keir Starmer and Boris Johnson. I think Keir Starmer would have sacked that health secretary straight away. Now, as you know, I've been a huge critic of Keir Starmer. I think he's been a poor Labour leader. And I think a lot of the choices he's made has just totally unnecessarily alienated vast swathes of the population. And I think that he doesn't offer very much in the way of concrete policy. Even simple stuff like reversing NHS privatisation, or a public social care programme, or raising the minimum wage to a living wage and then tying it to changes in worker productivity and inflation, or stuff like that. Public ownership of rail, mail, water and energy. He hasn't even said that he'd support any of those. So he's been a very disappointing Labour leader, and obviously it looks like Labour are going to lose the Batley and Spen by-election, which is a seat that Labour have won for a very long time. They won it under Jeremy Corbyn. I'm sure they'll find a way to blame Jeremy Corbyn, but he hasn't been very good. It's this kind of thing, though, that shows you the difference between them, and why ultimately it would be better to have Keir Starmer as Prime Minister than someone like Boris Johnson. However, I think the majority of the public will not see that, because it's not enough, and Starmer isn't taking advantage of the media frenzy around these kind of things, and he needs to be kind of direct and focused, like he is in PMQs, whenever he gets a chance to go on BBC News or ITV or Sky or Channel 4 or whatever. So, yeah. I'd like more of that from Keir Starmer, but I fear it's far too late. It reminded me of what he was like when he first became Labour leader, and we all had such high hopes for him, and Labour were doing a lot better in the polls and everything. But, I guess we'll have to see. I do think it's a total disgrace that Boris Johnson didn't sack Matt Hancock. And it's a total disgrace that he hasn't sacked Priti Patel, who broke the ministerial code, and all the other members of the cabinet who've just very obviously broken the law or handed out public contracts with taxpayer money to their friends and the Conservative Party's donors. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's obvious rank corruption. But nothing will get done about it until we have a change of government, and that looks nigh on impossible for a very long time. So let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think that actually you know, that wasn't a sackable offence. I doubt many people do. But and how do you think Labour should be reacting to this? Do you think that, you know, Labour are also pretty corrupt, so it doesn't even matter that much? I don't know, I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed the video, if you liked it, you know, then why not translate that into a digital form and click the like button? Or, you know, even better, if you're feeling extra wild, subscribe and click the bell.